Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to answer a somewhat ongoing and sometimes passive-aggressive reader question, which is, what are publishers doing for those 2 years between when the contract says they accept my manuscript and when the book is on the shelves?
What are we doing? We're like going out for martini lunches and...
I know, the vacation season is brutal.
Getting our nails done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you need a better
I need
manicurist.
Okay, so it goes. There's always room for improvement, fans.
But what do we actually do? There's a lot that we do. It's not all in your book, but
I guess it's hard, I think, to picture the day-to-day, and I think that's sort of like what it's getting at, is that, you have this idea that, you can just hit the send button and you're all done, and that it just doesn't work that way in practice.
That is how you produce a book-shaped object.
Because some things that are like antiquated but most things do have a very good reason, as much as you maybe can't see it in the beginning, And part of it does go back to the fact of we've received exactly one book ever in 25 years that essentially did not need severe developmental editing, followed by severe rounds of line editing, followed by severe rounds of proofreading. And that one book, The Prodigal Rogerson, I think we found 2 typos maybe in it, but it had been originally edited to be a magazine piece, and then it ended up being way too long, and so it had a good amount of pre-editorial work, but in the most part, it's not even that. It's most of my days are spent reading contracts, spent writing contracts, spent making agreements, things like that, and that's everything from who is going to print the book to who we have foreign licenses with to the nature of those licenses and their duration. And I could easily work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for those 2 years and not ever get caught up with my work completely. That is not an exaggeration, because there is just simply that much to do all the time,
I guess I have more to do with the sort of the day-to-day of your book specifically, both on the marketing and the editorial sides. And I guess the thing that I think is helpful for authors to understand is books, we group books into seasons. All publishers, most publishers do, all trade publishers do. So we have anywhere from 10 to 20 books that we're working on all at once, all on the same deadline pretty much, or in the same 3-month zone of deadlines. So, we might spend 2 to 3 weeks total of someone's full-time working on your book specifically, but then that person is also responsible for all of these other books, and then we're also have to time it so that we get your edits to you and we wait for them to come back, and we're kind of juggling a lot of different deadlines and a lot of different workflows. So editorial is part of that, even though there's a lot of sort of time when we're not editing your book. There's a lot of time when we are. And then marketing is another part. There's a series of kind of milestones that we need to hit in those 2 years in order to get the information that the salespeople and the sales reps and the industry and the publicity team and all that need about the book to them, so that they can sell it on these very, very elongated schedules that various different buyers are buying on.
And the real thing of that I think is really hard to understand is, first of all, the normal first question is like, oh, okay, well, why don't you just hire more people? Why don't you hire more editors? Why don't you hire more staff? And then this wouldn't be so much of a thing. And then, the answer to that is like, we would then have to do that many more books, because if we were only publishing your book and your book didn't sell, we would go out of business,
It's true. We would also be very bored while you were working on our revisions.
Right. And most of our time, like most of your time, is spent waiting,
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's a hurry up and wait cycle over and over and over. But then the other part of that people don't seem to understand is like the percolation on that volume schedule and proportions. So like we review daily pitches, and then, it's sort of like which ones of those fit into our list and fit into our core competencies and fit into, like it's called bag widening, where you use one book to better sell in other books to, reach certain audiences and retailers mostly. And like, you are known for doing certain things, so. And then if you can like sort of edge out very slightly from your nucleus each month, year, decade. And then, so part of that is we have to sort of percolate on those ideas. We have to say like, okay, what's the way to express it? Especially if it's like something that's slightly new for us. So those ones are a little more complicated, because we have to say like, okay, what does the title and subtitle need to be? What does the cover need to look like? How, and especially if it's a new series or a new subject for us, the first few really have to be home runs, or people are just going to think of us as somebody that produces books that do not sell in that category.
Oy. Yeah. And I mean, that's why we definitely have at least one book that we've delayed this season to publish in a different season, because we can't come up with the right title.
Yeah, and there's normally more than one.
Yeah.
And so that's the lot of it. But, and it is a lot of this, I mean, and just things like so-and-so needs such and such to do their job, so-and-so has these kinds of questions, and, and that really does eat up a lot of capacity, like, within a publisher, And even just things like what happened under COVID, where there was so much more work to do, because even the simplest tasks became much more complicated because everything was delayed, and, shipping companies were well past, I mean, I got the statistic this morning that international boat freight costs have tripled even during the off season. So it's like really a terrifying thing to think of, like how bad that is going to be during the holidays.
And then delays always beget other delays.
Yeah.
Like if you want your book to come out 5 years from when you turn it in, the best way to do that is to miss your deadline, because then like it loses its place on our schedule, it loses its place in like our workflow of editorial and marketing. It's like,
Yeah.
we also like stop expecting you to turn things in on time, so we like don't predict that you will again, so we like lengthen that timeline even more. So yeah.
And then it is the weird the tendency is that if somebody misses one deadline, they tend to miss numerous deadlines.
So then we kind of deprioritize that book, and then your book comes out even later. Sorry, everyone.
And so that's kind of what goes on. And then, we're negotiating with salespeople. Salespeople are saying this store needs this by this date. Is that possible? And that's often an unanswerable question under the current world order, where
right. Like,
we ask our printer when something is coming, and they say something dodgy like, oh, it's scheduled to go on bindery on Wednesday. And then, Friday rolls around, and you're like, any word on that? And then you don't really get a response.
Yep.
And then,
Yeah.
and so, it's things like that where, and I imagine we are probably one of the less pushy customers they have, and so I do imagine that, there are bigger problems at bigger companies is kind of the take I have,
Yeah.
Lots of talk of, hiring freezes and the like, and budget freezes, and, people are really sort of teeth grit for the worst. So, a lot of it is, you kind of have to not resign yourself to that, but sort of like lean into your best possible and most likely outcomes rather than assuming everything is going downhill.
I do want to say that, like, if you're an author and you think it's taking forever to get your book out, the, like, worst thing to do is to email your publisher every day or every week and be like, can I have an update?
Yeah.
Because then we spend all our time answering those emails and not working on your book or the other books that are coming out that same season. And then we get more behind and we get really kind of frustrated with you because we tell you the schedule.
Right. And it's just not a helpful way to express anxiety or any feeling.
The squeaky wheel does not get the grease. The squeaky wheel just gets delays.
Yeah. And so what, I guess it's like understanding and processing those timelines from the get-go, and then periodically asking for clarification if something seems to have changed, because a lot of times somebody that's over capacity isn't always going to be expressing or communicating things as much as they thought they did, just from overwhelm and the like.
Yeah, or if you're like, I'm going to have 3 weeks off and I'd love to spend it working on my book, like, tell us that, and that's, like, good for us, because we can be like, oh, well, that's our deadline to get you back your draft.
Right, and that's normally doable. But yeah, so that's kind of what goes on under the hood. And, and a lot of it is just like something came up, or in the case of last year, everybody missed their deadline and it screwed up this year, and then we are just now.
We're finally starting to get
we're like
ahead.
Back on schedule,
Kind of, almost, sort of,
but
mostly.
Like the printers aren't back on schedule and the authors aren't entirely on schedule. So it's a little, half dozen of one, six of the other.
I'm still editing books up until the minute they go to print right now. I don't feel like I'm back on schedule.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
On Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.